They called her too fat to marry. The cowboy said she was perfect for his arms. Before we begin, take a moment to comment. Your city, where are you watching from today? And when the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Now settle into a quiet place. Breathe deep and let the whispers of the Wild West carry you into tonight's tale. Whispering Creek, 1875. Inside a weathered wooden room, dusty sunlight poured through the window like silent ribbons of gold. A letter slipped from a young woman's hand, landing on the floor with a dry, hollow sound. Olivia Baker, 22 years old, round in figure, dressed in a simple gown. Her honey blonde hair, pinned neatly, clutched the crumpled page to her chest. Tears slid down her flushed cheeks and trembled at the corner of her lips. The wind slipped through the cracks in the boards, carrying the scent of dried pine and the cold ash of a fire long gone out. She lifted her head. Her eyes still ached with hurt, yet within them flickered a thin, steady line of light determination. In a town where a woman's worth was weighed by gossip, she had just been told she was not enough to love. Olivia closed her small trunk, drew in a deep breath, and stepped toward the threshold. Tonight, the dusty road would carry her somewhere unknown, and perhaps out here, in the unforgiving West, someone might dare open his arms to a heart the whole town had cast aside. The wind from the prairie swept red dust along the lone main road of Pine Ridge, a small frontier town tucked between gray-green mountains. Afternoon sun laid a copper glow across the wooden rooftops. Hinges creaked on the porch of the general store, mingling with the scents of leather fresh ground flour and thin curls of smoke rising from scattered cabins. On the rough-hewn notice board, a yellowed paper fluttered, "Teacher wanted." A young woman stood before it, a heavy wooden suitcase in her hands. Her figure was full yet steady. Olivia Baker, 22, her honey gold hair tied in a neat bun. Her simple dress, clean and modest, lifted her chin a little higher, though her heart still trembled after leaving Whispering Creek. From the porch of the general store, a few men lounged in their chairs, eyes narrowing as they sized her up. One let out a whistle. Another spat tobacco onto the dirt. The rest stayed silent, watching as though the presence of a stranger woman was some kind of challenge. Olivia drew in a deep breath. The taste of dust and dry pine filled her lungs. Still, she walked forward into town. Tension pulled her shoulders tight, but a spark of pride lit her gaze. No matter how they look at me, I am a teacher. And this will be my new beginning. From afar came the steady beat of hooves echoing off the cliffs, quickening the rhythm of her anxious heart. A rider approached, his tall frame taking shape through the haze of sunlit dust, a cowboy of few words, yet one the whole town seemed to respect. Olivia didn't know it yet, but the very first pair of eyes that fell upon her this day would lead her toward the path of her destiny. Part 1. The Cruel Letter. Evening. Gold settled over Whispering Creek, 1875. Inside the old wooden house, light slanted through the window, striping the walls with pale streaks that seemed intent on uncovering every hurt too heavy to hide. The air was thick, so heavy you could hear the pendulum clock marking time in its slow rhythm, while the fire in the hearth had long since gone out, leaving only the faint smoke of what once was. In Olivia Baker's trembling hands, the crumpled letter quivered, as though it too could feel the pounding of her heart. The slanted lines of ink were still sharp, cowardly apologies, cold reasons, and the broken promise of marriage. I need a wife. Society can accept. And that cannot be you. One single sentence enough to erase 2 years of hope. Olivia's grip tightened, hot tears spilling onto the page, seeping into the ink until the words blurred into cruel stains. Yet they did not wash her world away. They only etched the pain deeper. Behind her came her mother's husky voice. Olivia. The widowed woman, her gray hair thin and tired, leaned against the doorframe, bony hand clutching her skirt. She had seen everything from the moment the letter arrived that morning to the hours her daughter sat unmoving in grief. Her eyes held pity, but also helplessness. My girl, there's nothing wrong with you. It's they who are blind. Olivia looked up, lashes heavy with tears. They called me too fat to marry Mama. They said no one would ever want to see a bride like me walk down an aisle. Her voice caught fragile as a thread. And I believed them. I believed it so much, I feel I have no place left here. Her mother stepped closer, wrapping her arms around her daughter's trembling shoulders. In that warmth, Olivia felt the quiet strength of a woman who had endured loss and still tried to be her child's shelter. A small town cannot define you. She whispered, the faint scent of pine clinging to her silver hair. Your heart is wide enough to teach, to love, to give. They are not worthy to decide your worth. Olivia closed her eyes, letting the tears fall. Yet deep inside, another fire kindled, born of humiliation, shaping itself into resolve. She rose and moved to the old wooden trunk beneath her bed. Inside, she folded her plain dresses, tucked in worn school books, a quill pen, and her mother's embroidered pillow. Each piece was a part of her life, a quiet vow that Olivia Baker would not wither beneath the scornful stares of Whispering Creek. Mama, she said, her voice still shaking, but her eyes changed. If here I am only a joke, then I will go elsewhere, somewhere they need a teacher, and somewhere perhaps I'll be seen for what I can do, not how I look. Her mother froze, then slowly nodded. If that is your choice, I won't stand in your way. I only beg you to keep faith that you are worthy of love. At that moment, wind slipped through the cracks, carrying the scent of dust and pine resin, the smell of far-off roads and new beginnings. Olivia lifted her gaze to the sunset beyond the window, a sky streaked in red, like her own heart, wounded yet burning bright. She folded the letter and laid it in the bottom of her trunk, burying a piece of her past. The creak of the old lock sounded like a promise. A new door in her life was about to open. I will go, Mama Olivia whispered, resting her hand on the trunk. And I will prove to them I don't need to fit into anyone's eyes. I only need to find the place where this heart belongs. In the quiet house, two women, one old, one young, stood side by side. The pain was still there, yet faith had begun to glimmer, and out beyond the harsh west, stretched wide, waiting for a proud, round-figured girl to step from the shadows of judgment into the beginning of her destiny. Part 2. The strange town. The western wind blew fierce, sweeping red dust along the single road of Pine Ridge. Afternoon sun spilled across the low wooden porches, where a handful of men sat with boots, propped eyes narrowing in judgment. From somewhere down the trail came the hollow rhythm of hooves, mingling with the smell of leather saddles, dry hay, and thin smoke drifting in the air. Olivia Baker stepped down from the stagecoach, her dress already coated with the dust of the road. Her hand clutched the handle of a heavy wooden trunk, the meager possessions of a young teacher chasing a new beginning. Sweat dampened her back, yet still she held her chin high. "Don't let them see you tremble," she told herself, though her heart cinched tight under the weight of so many watching eyes. A familiar figure to the people of Pine Ridge moved toward her from the steps of the small church at the end of the street. Reverend Porter, a tall, gaunt man in middle age. His black robe snapped in the wind, and deep lines furrowed his stern face. He walked slowly, his gray eyes sweeping over Olivia from head to toe, his look carrying no veil of welcome. "You're the newcomer." His voice rang out dry as the dust beneath their feet. Olivia swallowed hard, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, Reverend. My name is Olivia Baker, the teacher the school board sent for." Porter's brow lifted slightly. A teacher. He clasped his hands behind his back, his gaze lingering too long at her rounded waist. Silence stretched so long, it seemed the whole town was holding its breath for his verdict. "Here," he said at last, voice slow, "we value discipline and example. A teacher is not only one who gives lessons, but one the young girls are meant to follow." The words stung sharp, piercing the tenderest part of Olivia's heart. She had left Whispering Creek to escape such scornful eyes, and yet within moments of arriving in Pine Ridge, the cold wind of judgment found her again. But Olivia did not step back. She tightened her grip on the trunk, the scent of old wood rising, as if to remind her of the long, weary road that had brought her here. "Reverend?" She answered, her voice steadier than her quaking nerves. "I believe an example is not set by shape or figure, but by the heart, and by how one teaches." From the porch of the general store came a low whistle, followed by the mocking chuckle of a few idle men. Porter only drew in a slow breath, his eyes darkening. "We shall see," he said curtly. The wind caught the edge of his robe, dust rising around his worn black shoes. He turned and walked away, leaving Olivia standing alone, her trunk set down upon the gravelly red earth. Her heart raced wildly, yet inside the storm of worry burned a flame that would not die. At the far end of the street, a weathered sign marked schoolhouse, creaking in the wind. Olivia drew a deep breath. The scent of pine from the hills nearby drifted toward her, whispering softly, "Don't give up." She bent, lifted her trunk once more. Her shoulders trembled, but her eyes carried pride again. Olivia's footsteps rang along the dusty road, leaving behind the cold stairs, walking straight toward a town harsh enough to test her to the core. Part 3. The Powerful Cowboy. The sound of hooves echoed down the dusty street of Pine Ridge, each strike heavy as a battle drum. Evening wind whipped the air into a haze of red dust, and from within that blur, a tall figure began to emerge. Wade Mallister, the name every soul in this town knew, whispered whenever it was spoken aloud. He rode a massive black horse, its long mane flying like dark waves. A brown duster hung heavy with road dust, his cowboy hat pulled low across a sun-browned face. Yet no one needed to see clearly to know those cold blue eyes were fixed straight ahead, steady and proud. The men lounging on the porch of the general store fell silent. One pulled back the cigar in his hand. Another, who had been smirking, tipped his head respectfully. Wade's presence seemed to shift the air itself, as if even the wind paused when he passed. From the window of the small wooden schoolhouse at the end of the street, Olivia was dusting the chalkboard when the sound of hooves reached her. She looked up, her hand stilled on the slate. Through the faded glass, his towering figure entered her sight. Her heart clenched in an unfamiliar way. That man, though little more than a shape rising through the haze, radiated a strength that spoke without words. Sunlight glowed against his broad shoulders, his duster flaring with each gust of wind. Wade never glanced toward the porches or the whispers that followed him. He seemed above them all, needing no proof of who he was. Only as he neared the schoolhouse did his hand tug the reins. The black horse tossed its head with a sharp whinny. For the briefest moment, those cold blue eyes turned toward the window. Olivia startled. In that fleeting instant, their gazes met. She saw something hidden beneath his sternness, something deep, unreadable, as though he could see straight through the fragile defenses she had tried so hard to build. Her breath caught. Her heart thundered against her ribs, not from fear, but from shock. Shock that his look was unlike the stares she had endured before. It held no mockery, no pity. It was an appraisal cool and unflinching, yet strangely, it made her feel seen. She stepped back, hand pressing against her chest, where her pulse raced. When she looked again, Wade had already turned away, spurring his horse forward. His straight-backed figure dissolved into the rolling dust, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than words. Children spilled into the street, running after the cloud of dust, their laughter rising like cheers. An old woman on a porch nodded slowly, muttering to herself, "Mr. McAllister. No one dares cross him." Olivia gripped her handkerchief eyes, falling to her dust-stained shoes. A question surged inside her, one she could not push aside. Who was that man? And why could a single glance leave me trembling? So the schoolroom grew still once more. Only the soft tap of chalk falling into its tray, the whistle of wind slipping through the wooden cracks, and within Olivia's heart, an aftershock that lingered as though destiny itself had just knocked at her door. Part 4. The First Lesson. Morning light filtered through the dusty windows of the little wooden schoolhouse, laying pale stripes across the rough-hewn benches. Chalk dust mingled with the scent of old timber, while the faint whistle of wind pressed against the walls, making the room feel at once distant and warm. Olivia Baker stood before the blackboard, her simple blue dress worn but neat. Her voice carried slow and even letter A, as in apple. Who can give me another example? A small girl raised her hand, trembling, her eyes bright. Angel, ma'am. The class giggled, and Olivia smiled too, her gaze softening. For a fleeting moment, she forgot all the scorn beyond these walls. Here she was a teacher, and every eager pair of young eyes proved her worth more than any cruel whisper ever could. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps on the porch, each one striking the wood with weight. The door creaked open, filling the frame with a tall figure. Wade McAllister. The air in the room shifted at once. The children sat straighter, their faces a mix of awe and fear. Olivia felt her own heartbeat stumble, but she would not let her hand tremble. "Please come in, Mr. McAllister," she said evenly, chalk still in her grasp. Wade dipped his head, those cold blue eyes sweeping across the room. Without a word, he stepped inside, boots striking the floor, the faint smell of leather and dust trailing after him. He sat at the back, his broad shoulders seeming to fill the space entirely. Olivia drew in a breath. Chalk dust swirled in the light, reminding her of her mother's words, "Your heart is wide enough to give." She turned back to the board, continuing her lesson, though Wade's gaze pressed against her like a weight. She wrote the chalk, clicking softly. "Now let us learn numbers. 1, 2, 3. Her voice stayed gentle, slow, and clear, though her pulse raced beneath it. She knew he was not only watching the children, he was measuring her. The children began to echo her words, their small voices mingling with the wind's whistle. As Olivia moved between the rows, her dress brushing the wooden floor, she rested a hand on the shoulder of a hesitant boy. Her eyes encouraged him. "You can do it." From the back, Wade watched in silence. His expression barely changed, but his eyes narrowed ever so slightly, carrying not just cold judgment, but something deeper. A flicker of consideration, perhaps even a glimmer of surprise at her steady resolve. When the little bell by the door chimed for recess, the children spilled into the yard, laughter ringing through the dusty air. Only Olivia and Wade remained. She turned, offering a polite smile. "Do you have any questions about my methods of teaching Mr. Mallister?" He rose, his tall frame making the room feel smaller. Folding his arms, his voice came low and gravelly. "You kept them in order. Better than I expected." A spark of pride lifted in Olivia's chest. "I am a teacher, and I am here to prove it." Wade tilted his head, his eyes holding something unreadable respect, or perhaps only curiosity. Then he gave a slight nod. "We'll see how long you last in Pine Ridge." He turned and left the scent of horse and wind lingering in his wake. Olivia stood still, her hand tightening on the chalk until it crumbled into dust. Yet instead of despair, a new fire lit in her eyes. No matter the prejudice, no matter the weight of that cold gaze, she would not yield. Outside, the children's laughter carried across the yard, a living witness to Olivia Baker's first day in Pine Ridge and the beginning of a bond neither she nor Wade could have foreseen. Part 5. The storm breaks. Noon settled over Pine Ridge beneath an unusual gray light. Heavy clouds crawled across the mountains, thunder rumbling low and restless. The little wooden schoolhouse trembled under each gust of wind. Parents had already taken their children home, except for one small figure huddled near the stove. Rebecca Mallister clutched her grammar book to her chest, her blue eyes wide with worry. Miss Baker? Uncle Wade should have been here by now. Olivia knelt beside her, draping a woolen shawl around the child's shoulders. "It's a storm, sweetheart. Perhaps he's delayed on the road, but we're safe here." Her voice was calm and low, a steady breath against the chaos outside. Wind whistled through the cracks, and rain began to lash the windows, each drop striking like tiny stones. Olivia fed the fire flames leaping higher, painting her round cheeks warm in their glow. The scent of burning wood blended with the sweetness of cocoa she had just brewed, a fragrance that softened the storm's chill. "Here, Rebecca." Olivia smiled, offering a small porcelain cup. "Take a sip. The cocoa will warm you." The girl's small hands trembled as she accepted it, but her breathing eased. Outside, the rain hammered on, yet within the room was the crackle of fire and the gentle steam of a warm drink. Suddenly, a bolt split the sky, thunder crashing so loud it rattled the panes. Rebecca startled, spilling drops of cocoa. Olivia quickly set the cup aside and wrapped the child in her arms. "Hush now. You're safe. I'm here." At that very moment, bang, the door burst open. Wind and rain swept in, carrying grit and the sting of cold air. In the doorway stood a man, Wade Mallister. His brown duster clung heavy with rain, his black hat dripping, and in his piercing blue eyes shone a rare flash of fear. He strode forward, wet boots striking the wood, the sharp smell of horse and storm following him. "Rebecca." His voice, rough and edged with tension, filled the room. The girl sprang to her feet, tears of fear and relief spilling as she ran. "Uncle." She flew into his arms, not caring that his coat was soaked and icy. Wade bent low, holding her tight, his broad hand smoothing her hair. The stern lines of his face softened into something tender, rare. "I'm here, little one. I'm here now." By the fire, Olivia still held the cup of cocoa, watching the scene with a sudden ache in her chest. Softly, she said, "Rebecca was very brave. We waited for you by the fire." "And with cocoa." Wade lifted his gaze to hers. This time, no chill. Only worry fading into something quieter, something like gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Baker," he murmured, his gravelly voice subdued. Raindrops fell from his coat onto the wooden floor, but the warmth inside seemed to close the distance between them. Olivia set the second cup on the table, gently offering it to him. "You should warm yourself, too." For the briefest moment, their hands touched. Her warmth reached through the damp chill of his coat, and Wade stilled his eyes, holding words unspoken. Then he simply nodded. Rebecca curled by the stove again, chattering now to chase away her fear. In the flicker of firelight, Olivia and Wade sat across from each other, the storm raging beyond the walls. Between them stretched a silence heavy but strangely tender. And in that silence, Olivia saw clearly for the first time beneath the cold duster and stern gaze Wade Mallister was simply a man, unyielding, yes, but shaken when a child he loved was in danger. In those hard blue eyes, a small opening had appeared, just wide enough for her to step through. Part 6. Supper at the Ranch. The rain had just passed. The valley was heavy with the scent of damp earth and fresh grass. The road to Mallister Ranch lay muddy, the wagon wheels creaking as they rolled, yet the glow of a lantern swinging on the wide porch burned steady, a beacon in the dark. Olivia stepped down her dress, still stained with splashes of mud. Rebecca tugged her hand eagerly toward the house, her voice bubbling with delight. "Miss Baker, Uncle Wade says you're to join us for supper. Mrs. Gunderson baked fresh bread, too." Inside the broad dining room, the hearth blazed bright firelight, throwing warm orange against the pine walls. A long oak table stood at the center, set with simple fare, a pot of stew, still steaming golden-crusted bread, a plate of garden greens. Nothing fancy, yet rich with the scent of home. Wade had shed his rain-soaked duster, wearing only a thick gray shirt. He sat at the head of the table, his tall frame making the room feel smaller. When Olivia entered, he lifted his gaze. The firelight reflected in his blue eyes, no longer cold, but watchful, as though weighing each small detail of the young teacher before him. Olivia took her seat, her hand trembling slightly as she pulled the shawl from her hair. Rebecca settled between them, her face aglow with innocence. "I told her about how you read to me before bed, Uncle," the girl chirped. Wade tilted his head, the corner of his mouth shifting just a hint of a smile. "Rebecca talks too much." He answered, his gravelly voice softer than usual. The meal began. Spoons clinked against earthen bowls. The stew was hearty, the bread crisp. Olivia found herself surprised here in the harsh West. This home was ordered complete, not the dwelling of a lonely man. "You truly have a large library?" she asked without thinking, recalling Rebecca's stories. Wade paused, spoon suspended. His eyes dimmed. "Yes, books are what remained, when the war took everything else." His voice was heavy, like wind pressing against stone. Olivia lowered her eyes in quiet respect. Silence lingered, only the crack and pop of wood in the fire. Then Rebecca broke through with her laughter. "He reads Dickens to me, and poetry too." Olivia's lips curved into her first true smile in days. "Then you may be the luckiest little girl in all of Pine Ridge." Wade's eyes lingered on Olivia, unreadable, as if hearing something beyond her words. And in that moment, warmth seemed to pass through the room, not just from the fire, but from the presence of 3 souls gathered around an old wooden table. When the meal was done, Rebecca's eyelids drooped with sleep. Wade lifted her into his arms, his rough exterior melting into tenderness. "Sleep well, little one," he murmured. Then his gaze shifted back to Olivia, a silent confession, without words. This child was his whole world. Olivia nodded gently, a strange swell of feeling rising within her. For the first time, the new school teacher of Pine Ridge did not feel like an outsider. She had touched, however briefly, the heart of this household. And in the glow of the lantern's golden light, as Wade returned to the table and poured her a cup of hot tea, Olivia understood this night was more than a simple meal. It was the beginning of something deeper, something that could alter the course of her life in Pine Ridge. Part 7. The Confession. Night draped quietly over the valley. The wind still whistled through the pines outside, but inside the ranch house, only the fire spoke crackling softly in the hearth. McAllister's library opened like another world, shelves of tall wooden cases crowded with leather-bound books. The golden firelight glinting along their spines, sending back shimmering streaks of light. Olivia sat in a fabric-covered armchair, her hands clutching her skirt, her chest rising with restless breath. From supper until now, her heart had grown heavier. The warmth of this place too close to the home she had once longed for stirred old wounds awake. Wade stood near the fire, one hand braced on the mantel, the other holding a cup of tea gone cold. The flames threw his shadow tall against the wall, strong, unyielding, yet his shoulders seemed to carry the weight of a world. His stern blue eyes had softened, as if he sensed what Olivia was about to say. "Mr. McAllister?" Her voice broke as she began. "There's something I believe you should know. Not about the school, but about me." He turned fully toward her gaze, steady, silent. Olivia drew in a breath, filled with the scent of wood smoke and warm ash. Her hands trembled, but at last the words spilled out. "People have said I'm too fat to marry." The sound of it cut the quiet like a blade through cloth. She forced a smile though tears brimmed. 3 times I trusted in a promise of marriage. 3 times they left me taking my faith with them. The last, only weeks before the wedding. And the whole town, they made me into a joke, as if I was unworthy of love. Her shoulders shook. She bowed her head, tears slipping onto her dress, sinking into the coarse fabric like stains that could never fade. Wade's grip on the cup tightened until his knuckles turned white, Firelight revealed the storm, gathering in his eyes, blue darkened with fury. Fools. He rasped the word rough, rolling heavy as stones down a canyon. Olivia lifted her head, startled. Those men Wade's steps fell heavy, each one thudding against the wooden floor. They are blind, cowardly. A woman is not measured by her waistline, nor by the shallow gaze of society. A woman is measured by her heart, her mind, her courage. He stopped before her chair, his tall frame blocking the firelight. In his eyes burned not ice, but fire anger and something softer. Olivia, his voice dropped low and certain. I saw you stand firm with the children. I saw you face down the stairs on the street. You are stronger than any who dare mock you. And to me, his broad hands shook slightly as he drew breath. To me, there is nothing lacking in you. The air stilled. Olivia sat, frozen eyes shining with tears. For the first time in years, her pain was seen not to be judged, but to be defended. You truly believe that, she whispered, her voice trembling as if hope itself might shatter. Wade nodded, never looking away. I don't waste words. The men who hurt you were never worthy of a moment by your side. The fire flared, reflecting in his blue eyes. Olivia's hand pressed against the chair's arm, her heart racing. A draft slid through the cracks, making the flames dance, and in that moment she realized the storm inside her had been halved, carried now by someone else. Wade said nothing more. He simply stood there, his eyes softening, his silence a vow. Some wounds did not need healing words, only the courage of another standing near. Tonight, he had chosen to stand with her, and in the glow of firelight, surrounded by walls of books, two souls who had once closed themselves in loss now found something new. Their pain, instead of dividing them, had become the quiet thread drawing them closer. Part 8. The words that changed everything. The winter sun hung low, its light glinting across the frozen lake, a silver mirror stretching wide beneath the sky. The world was hushed so still that the sleigh bells jingling from the harness sang like a soft hymn, blending with the steady rhythm of hooves on deep snow. Olivia pulled her shawl tighter around her neck, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold wind. Beside her, Wade Mallister sat firm and steady, his broad hands gripping the reins, his shoulders like a shelter against the open air. Each breath he released rose as a cloud of white, vanishing into the icy stillness. It's beautiful. Olivia whispered, her eyes wide, as she took in the valley stretched before them, ridges of pine blanketed in white, and the lake glittering under the pale sun. Wade gave a slight nod, the corner of his mouth lifting faintly. This land is the heart of it all. I found it after the war, and I knew I would never leave it. Olivia looked at him, her brown eyes hesitant. She understood he wasn't just speaking of land. He was speaking of home, of a place worth guarding with his life. And now, seated beside him, she felt herself being drawn into a circle she had never belonged to before. The sleigh slowed and came to a stop in the middle of the lake. The wind swept across, carrying a hush from the distant forest. Wade set the reins aside, then turned toward her. His blue eyes clear and deep reflected both the frozen sky and a hidden fire within. Olivia. His voice was rough, yet gentler than she had ever heard it. He reached, taking her trembling hand in his. She gasped softly, her heart pounding. His warmth spread into her fingers, threading through the chill, like a flame slipping between layers of snow. In Whispering Creek, Wade said each word heavy, As a vow, they called you too fat to marry. His eyes flared with anger before softening his voice, dropping low, raw with feeling. Fools, every last one of them. Tears shimmered in Olivia's eyes. Before she could speak, he tightened his hold, leaning closer, his gaze tender now. To me, Wade paused, his breath rising in the cold air. You're the perfect size for these arms. He drew her close, his strong embrace closing around her full figure, leaving no space between them. And in that moment, Olivia felt every wound, every whisper, every year of shame melt away like ice beneath the sun. Tears slid down her flushed cheeks, soaking into her wool cloak. But this time, they were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of salvation. Wade, she breathed, her voice breaking. You don't know what this means to me. He lowered his head, his forehead resting against hers, eyes shut as though to brand the moment into his very soul. I do know, Olivia, because I too was judged. I was seen as nothing more than a hard man, unworthy of love. But here on this frozen lake, I want you to believe me. I see you, all of you, and I want to keep you. A sob burst from her chest, but within it bloomed a radiant smile. She let herself sink against him, listening to the steady thrum of his heart, like the sure rhythm of hooves on a trail. Around them, the world lay blanketed in white. The wind lifted flakes of snow, glittering like 1,000 falling stars. Yet within his arms, Olivia felt the warmth of spring. They remained there for a long while, letting time stretch and slow, letting his words carve deeper than any scar. And from that moment on, Olivia knew her life had changed forever. Part 9. The Wedding by the Lake. Spring came early that year, as if nature itself wished to bless the love that had taken root in Pine Ridge. The snow melted away, revealing wide meadows of green surrounding the lake that only months before had been frozen still. Now the water shimmered, reflecting the blue of the sky, edged with wildflowers in yellow, white, and purple, blooming bright under the morning sun. A simple arch had been raised from pine branches and climbing vines draped with fresh blossoms woven by the women of town. The sound of a violin floated gently on the air, while the spring breeze tugged at skirts and hair like the quiet whispers of the earth itself. At the head of the flower-strewn path, Olivia Baker appeared. She wore a gown of ivory silk, stitched with care by Martha Holbrook and the townswomen. The fabric hugged her full figure, not concealing it, but honoring it soft and graceful, like the promise of a plentiful harvest. Her honey blonde hair fell in loose waves, touched with tiny white blooms. Her cheeks glowed, her eyes brimmed with tears, yet her smile shone so radiant it seemed to brighten the whole sky. Before her walked Rebecca in a pale blue dress, a basket of petals in her hand. Each step was careful, each toss of flowers eager. Her little face beamed with joy. For today she was not just scattering blossoms, she was welcoming a mother into her world. And at the end of that path beneath the arch stood Wade Mallister. His simple black suit cut a tall, steady figure. Strands of silver threaded his dark hair, catching the sunlight, but his blue eyes were deep and sure. When he saw Olivia, his face lifted with a rare, unwavering light, the glow of trust, of love beyond all doubt. The townsfolk fell silent, watching. Some who once whispered, who once doubted, now stood still, their hearts hushed by the truth before them. A woman walking in quiet pride, and a man waiting with a heart wide open. As Olivia drew near, Wade extended his hand. Her fingers, trembling, slipped into his palm, warm, solid, a shelter. Tears spilled, but her smile never faltered. Rebecca giggled, skipping back to the front row, her round eyes wide so as not to miss a single moment. Beneath the arch, the minister from Junction Creek raised his voice slow and steady, carrying across the sparkling lake. Today, we witness the joining of two souls. One, a man who has known loss. The other, a woman who has known rejection. They have found each other, and in that love, they have found themselves. Olivia's voice wavered as she spoke her vow. I promise to stand by you, not for appearances, but for your heart. I promise to love Rebecca as my own, and with you to build a home upon this harsh land. Wade answered his gravelly voice, trembling like wind across stone. I vow to love you as you are, every tear, every smile. They once called you too fat to marry fools blind to the truth. To me, you have always been the perfect fit. For these arms, for this heart. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Some wiped their eyes. Rebecca bit her lip, clutching her flower basket, her little heart pounding with joy. The minister smiled gently. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Wade bent, drawing Olivia into his steady arms, pressing a kiss to her lips as cheers broke over the meadow. The kiss was unhurried, not for show, but a vow before heaven and earth. After storms and sorrow, this was home. Rebecca darted forward, squeezing between them, throwing her arms around them both. They laughed, clasping hands, walking together down the path of flowers to the sound of the violin and the chorus of birds in the spring sky. In the golden sunlight, three figures blended into one family. And from that moment, Pine Ridge witnessed not just a wedding, but the birth of a new home where love turned every cruel judgment into dust. Part 10. A complete family night settled softly over Pine Ridge Valley, the sky clear and full of stars. At the ranch house, the fireplace glowed with steady flame, the scent of pine smoke curling through the warm air. Outside, the wind still whistled through the mountain pass, but within the wooden walls, the warmth spread like a great blanket wrapping around them all. On the thick rug before the fire, Rebecca sat cross-legged, weaving wildflowers left from the day's wedding into a tiny crown. She hummed under her breath, then lifted her shining eyes toward Olivia. I have a mama now. I really have a mama. Olivia smoothed a hand through the girl's hair, her chest swelling with emotion. And I have you, Rebecca, she whispered. You are the sweetest gift I could ever receive. From the chair beside the fire, Wade watched in silence. His rugged face had softened his blue eyes, bright with a happiness he could not hide. He reached out his calloused hand, covering Olivia's, where it rested on Rebecca's head. His grip was warm, steady, an unspoken vow. This was home, and it would last. Three hands joined small, between strong, delicate beside, steadfast. Firelight danced across them, forming a circle of light like a halo. Olivia lifted her gaze to Wade. In his eyes, she saw the stillness of mountains, the endurance of the land, and a love deep and quiet, yet endless. He leaned closer, his voice low. Do you see we've become a family? Her smile was radiant, a tear slipping down her cheek, sweet, not bitter. She rested her head against her husband's shoulder, Rebecca curling into her lap, the flower crown tumbling softly to the rug. The three of them sat together, as if nothing in the world beyond could matter anymore. The sound of wind, the crack of burning wood, the faint aroma of herbal tea from the kitchen, together they formed a lullaby of peace. Rebecca yawned, then whispered, before drifting into sleep, I have both Mama and Uncle Wade now. I'll never be lonely again." Olivia kissed the child's hair, murmuring, "No, you'll never be alone." Wade squeezed his wife's hand, his eyes steady on the fire. He needed no words, but Olivia knew this was the peace he had searched for all his life. Outside, the sky stretched wide with stars, showering the valley in silver. Inside, 3 hearts beat as one no longer surviving the West, but living fully, with love, with home, with family. 10 years later, a decade had passed since the wedding, by the lake time, etching its gentle marks on every face. The spring meadow stretched wide with sunlight, the lake below still shining like a mirror, reflecting sky, and distant mountains crowned with wildflowers. Wade Mallister stood tall on the hilltop, though silver now threaded through his dark hair. His broad shoulders still held strong, even as winters had carved lines into his face. Beside him stood Olivia, her beauty ripened, with years her eyes deep with love accumulated over time. Wade wrapped his arm around her, holding her, as he had on that day 10 years ago. Behind them, Rebecca had grown into a young woman. Her long hair tumbled loose, her slender frame graceful, her blue eyes, her uncle's eyes shining with trust and joy. She lingered a step back, letting her parents have the moment as though she understood it belonged to them. Wade leaned close, his voice low and warm. "Do you remember, Olivia? They once said you were too fat to marry." Olivia laughed softly, her smile touched with sweetness and a glimmer of tears. "How could I forget? It was those very words that drove me from Whispering Creek and led me to you." Wade tightened his embrace, the familiar scent of pine in his breath. His blue eyes glowed as he whispered, "Fools, every last one of them. For to me, you have always and will always be the perfect fit for these arms." Tears glistened at the corners of Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of joy. She laid her head against his shoulder, her heart singing the old refrain, peace after storms, love after judgment, home after years of rejection. Rebecca smiled, stepping forward to clasp her mother's hand. 10 years have passed, but to me, Mama, you're still the best gift Pine Ridge has ever had. Olivia held her daughter's hand tight, feeling the current of love flowing through generations. Together, they stood upon the hill, gazing down at the springtime lake. The wind carried wildflower petals around them like blessings. And in that moment, they knew the journey would go on, but love had become their shelter forever. Out here, in the rugged West, prejudice could break a heart. But love and kindness, these alone, built the only home that mattered. Before you turn out, the light leave the name of your city below. And if this story touched, you don't forget to give it a score from 0 to 10. Subscribe so you never miss the next Wild West love story that carries you gently into sleep.